Flood management techniques can be grouped into two categories: hard engineering and soft engineering. Hard engineering involves using artificial structures to try to control river processes. Embankments are raised riverbanks which allow the river to hold more water to reduce the risk of a flood. They can look unnatural if they are made of concrete, but they can also be made using mud dredged from the bottom of the river, which looks more natural and is cheaper. However, when embankments fail, they can burst, which worsens flooding. This was seen with Hurricane Katrina in 2005, where the failure of floodwalls caused 80% of New Orleans to be flooded. Dams trap water in the reservoirs behind them, allowing water to be released slowly to avoid flooding. They typically serve other purposes too, including water and electricity supply and recreation. However, they can be controversial. They are very expensive, and the area flooded for the reservoir usually destroys habitats and people's homes. Another issue is the dam doesn't just trap water. Sediment builds up behind the dam, which reduces the capacity of the reservoir over time. River straightening is where a straight channel is cut through meanders, and dredging the river makes it deeper. The deeper channel allows the river to hold more water, and the straighter channel speeds up the flow of the water. This reduces the flood risk in the area that the river has been straightened. However, the faster flow increases the risk of flooding in places further downstream. This fast flow also increases erosion, meaning the banks need to be reinforced or meanders will gradually form again in the future. Flood relief channels are artificial river channels built next to rivers to carry extra water. These channels can take any excess water away from valuable areas when the river flow is particularly high, reducing the risk of flooding. However, they can still flood, and they increase the risk of flooding where they rejoin the river. They can also be very expensive. Soft engineering techniques involve working with natural processes to reduce the risk of flooding. Afforestation is planting trees. Trees increase the rates of interception and infiltration, meaning it takes longer for a river to reach peak discharge. They also provide other environmental benefits and are very cheap. Flood warnings are used to help people prepare for a flood event. In England, the Environment Agency has 3 levels of flood warning. Flood alert is when farmland and roads are expected to be flooded. Flood warning is when homes and businesses are expected to be flooded. And severe flood warning is when there is expected to be a significant danger to human life and property. These warnings give time for people to prepare for a flood event, such as protecting their properties with sandbags and moving their valuable items upstairs. While this can reduce the impact, flooding of course still happens as they do not prevent it. Land use zoning involves restricting what can be built in areas on the floodplain. The area immediately next to the river is left empty, and the adjacent areas are used for pastures, parks or sport fields. Only after this will roads, industry and homes be allowed to be built. This reduces the risk of high-value land being flooded, meaning economic losses during a flood event are much lower. However, it is not always possible to implement this in places that have already been built on. Wetland or flood storage areas are where parts of the floodplain are deliberately allowed to flood to store water. This can effectively reduce the risk of flooding downstream and is inexpensive, but of course means that land can no longer be used for anything else.